Welcome back. We're joined by Representative Doug Lamborn. He represents the people of the 5th Congressional District of Colorado and serves in the House as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, also on the House Committee on Natural Resources. He chairs its subcommittee on energy and mineral resources. And maybe we're going to have to talk a little bit about the president's coal initiative with you on that score, too. But Congressman, welcome back to Secure Freedom Radio. Always good to have you with us.
Likewise, Frank, you do a great job for our country.
Well, thank you. I'm interested first, I guess, in sort of sounding you out, as I did with your colleague Congressman Marino earlier, about the Iran deal, how it looks to you as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, especially as a member who's been very concerned about missile threats to this country and this phenomenon of electromagnetic pulse and the possibility that that may be what the Iranians have in mind for us in the future.
Well, Frank, the more we look at it, the worse it looks. One of the latest outrages is the disclosure that secret protocols between the IAEA out of Vienna and Iran are not going to be disclosed to members of Congress, the people's representatives. And the administration was supposed to make sure every single facet of this agreement, including all side agreements, were at least reviewed, if not made public. So there's no transparency here. And that's very troubling because part of those secret protocols have to do with previous military activity on the part of Iran. And you have to know what the baseline is. If you don't know what's gone on in the past, you don't know how to monitor properly for what's happening in the future. So for so many reasons, it's looking worse and worse, Frank. And I hope the American people do pressure their senators and representatives to reject this dangerous deal.
Well, and this is the window to do that. Many of them are, like yourself, home in their districts or states in this August recess period. It is prime time, as you know, Congressman, for interacting with your constituents, getting their views on various issues and factoring those, of course, into your representation of them. To the extent that you have been a member of the EMP caucus in the House, Congressman, as well as the Missile Defense Caucus, you must be as concerned as I am that what we've seen the administration doing with this deal in terms of the billions of dollars they're going to have flow to Iran, the relieving of sanctions on their ballistic missile program, and other assistance that we're giving them in their nuclear program, as well as protecting it, that we're really setting ourselves up for disaster if they, in fact, opt for this kind of capability. How serious a threat do you regard that to be, and how important should it be to us that we make our grid more resilient against it?
Frank, it's very serious. You know, they're developing an intercontinental ballistic missile capability, and they say they want to wipe out Israel. Well, Israel does not need to be reached by intercontinental ballistic missiles from Iran. Theater missiles will do the job there, unfortunately. So it's us that they're coming after when they talk about intercontinental ballistic missiles. And we know that they have the desire to capitalize on things like electromagnetic pulse and nuclear weapons to put those kinds of mass weapons of destruction on ballistic missiles. And so for this administration to put no curbs at the negotiating table on this kind of dangerous program is just yet one more of the many flaws in this dangerous negotiated deal.
And the fact that Congress is going to be given a limited ability to consider it makes all the more important, as you say, Congressman Doug Lamborn, the voice of the American people during this next couple of weeks. Congressman, one of the things, just as a segue, that is featured in the National Defense Authorization Act that you and your colleagues put together in the House of Representatives is a provision calling for the reconstitution of the EMP Commission, a very important expert body to advise and sort of monitor what's being done in this area to protect Americans against these various threats. What's the prospect, as you see it now, for that bill? I know that the president has threatened to veto it over some of the budget authorities that you've given the Pentagon. If you could make book on how it's going to proceed, what's your bet?
Well, I think the president will actually sign it. He's made that threat but signed bills like this in the past. I think the bigger threat, though, is with the Senate. The Senate, led by John McCain, have dug their heels in on making some cuts to personnel and benefits for personnel like the basic allowance for housing or pharmacy or commissaries. And those are the kinds of things in an all-volunteer Army that we do need for retention and to keep people who are highly trained there in the future so we can take advantage of their great training and expertise. So there really is a difference right now on benefits between the House and the Senate, a little bit more on Guantanamo Bay, but benefits is the biggest holding up point right now. And there's so many good things in the bill. Like you said, the EMP Commission, we need to get it passed.
This comes, of course, these cuts to personnel and their benefits comes at a time when the administration, of course, is, as we talked about earlier with Bishop E.W. Jackson, Congressman Lamborn, engaged in all kinds of social engineering of the military, but also just simply reducing its combat capability by some 40,000 personnel in the Army alone just recently. How would you characterize the condition of the military, the morale, the readiness, and our ability to train and support these folks who we're going to need more than ever in the near future, I'm afraid?
Well, unfortunately, we have a president who for 7 years now has been cutting defense because he has a view that American military strength is provocative and somehow negative and causes problems. I have the Ronald Reagan view, and many other, as well as of many others, who say we should have peace through strength. Yet this president's dangerous policies of cutting capability, cutting the numbers in our forces, cutting programs that are on the drawing board that we'll hope otherwise would have had in the future, cutting the most advanced programs like the F-22. He's kicking the can down the road, Frank, in ways that a successor in the White House is going to have to deal with all the mess that's being created. You look at ISIS, you look at Russia on the march. There's so many things. We left Iraq without any negotiated soft landing there, which gave rise to ISIS. There are so many things that this president has done wrong. He's kicking the can down the road. Iran is another huge example of that we're going to have messes to clean up many years into the future.
Your colleague, Congressman Marino, made a similar point. My only concern, I must tell you, Doug Lamborn, is that these messes may metastasize on what's left of this president's watch. If I were any of our adversaries, I would, I think, try to take advantage of having this president in the White House rather than a successor who hopefully will have a very different foreign and national security policy approach. Let me ask you a final question, Congressman. You've been one of the leaders on space-related issues, particularly the national security aspects thereof. Talk, if you would, for a moment about the space threats that you're perceiving and what we ought to be doing to counter them, as well as what's happening here on the ground.
Well, Frank, some of the threats we can't talk about in an open setting, unfortunately, but we do know for sure that our near peers, Russia and China, and others would love to, but they don't have quite the capability, they're aware that we have an asymmetrical advantage with our satellites and our dominance of space, and they know that by taking out military communications, GPS, some of our ISR assets, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, that they can really cripple the advantage we currently have in space. We don't have that many military satellites. The ones that we do have do a tremendous amount of work and have tremendous capability. But those are slow and expensive to get up into space, and our potential adversaries know that, and that's what they would like to go after. So we have to be one step ahead of them, which is expensive, and we have people like in the White House that don't want to make that investment.
And who perhaps will allow that vulnerability, as with the terrestrial one of our grid, persist if they have their own way. Congressman Doug Lamborn, your leadership on this issue and so many others is really appreciated on the House Armed Services Committee, also on the Natural Resources Committee. We've run out of time to talk about the coal decision, but I hope you'll come back to us again in the near future to discuss that as well. In the meantime, keep up the good work, sir, and enjoy your recess. Well-deserved. Next up, we'll talk with Andy McCarthy about Hillary Clinton's criminal conduct and more straight ahead.